Good morning. Welcome to Christ Church this morning. In 1977, a really famous film came out, and it opens with the 20th Century Fox logo and the fanfare that we're familiar with. And then the screen goes blank, and then words appear on the screen. The words are, "Long ago in a galaxy far, far away." It's the beginning of the prologue to Star Wars. It's where Star Wars begins. It's called the prologue. And the prologue is put into a film, and that particular film is a way of setting the film up. Today we have the prologue of John's Gospel, the first 18 verses of John's Gospel. It's the prologue. God became flesh. God came into the world. God came, the Logos. God became flesh. The Word became flesh. That's how it opens. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh. That's how that Gospel opens. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. So that's the famous prologue to Star Wars, the prologue to the most famous piece of Scripture in John's Gospel. And people often assume that prologues are written after the work is done. It's after it's completed. Then you write the prologue, kind of telling everybody what you're going to do in the film or the book or the article or whatever. Prologues are added on. And that's what people often assume about this piece of Scripture. I'm going to suggest that we shouldn't read it like the prologue. And in order to do that, I'm going to reference another film. Alexander Sakharov, in a film done in 2002, it's a very famous Russian film, and in it, it's called The Russian Ark. It's called The Russian Ark, and he covers 300 years of Russian history with a single take, a single sweeping take of a film. That's what he does. It's amazing. 2,000 actors, 50 makeup people, three full orchestras. The whole thing is one take. It's done in the Hermitage Museum. The Hermitage Museum has got 33 rooms in it. So this is a big thing, and he sweeps straight through the whole thing. It's one single take. And that's really, I think, what takes place in John's Gospel. It's a single take. It's a single arc. In the beginning. Just so you know, the curators of the Hermitage Museum, when they heard what Sakharov was going to do, actually booked 2 days. Sakharov wanted 1 day to do the shoot, and they didn't think he could do it. So they said, well, we'll give him an extra day. And they've never closed the museum for anything except Sakharov's film, The Russian Ark. And he did it in 1 day, one take. That's what takes place in this gospel. It's a single take. It's one gigantic take. In the beginning was the Word. John's gospel should be understood as a single take, a single arc, going back to the beginning of the universe, the very essence of the universe, when it all starts. That's where this gospel begins, at its very outset. At the beginning of it all is the Word, God, Logos, and that Word is love. That Word is love. That Word is relationship. In 1985, Paul Davis wrote a book called God and the New Physics. He's a physicist, he's also a Christian, and he's interested in cosmology. He's interested in how the whole thing began. And what physicists argue is that once upon a time, the entire universe was this big. It's tiny, the very beginning. The whole thing, all the stars, all the galaxies, all the planets, all the mountains were so compressed into a single thing that there was absolutely nothing. And in that moment of creation, this whole thing, everything, all that energy that's contained in that one thing, and all the suns, all the energy that's in that single moment blows up. Logos spreads into the world, and it all makes sense. It all fits into patterns, into rhythms, into formulas. It all makes sense, and it's all about relationship. It's all about connection. It's all about seeking each other out. Over time, we've lost that capacity to do that. We've lost the ability to do that. And how have we done that? Let me reference First Nation spirituality, particularly the Mi'kmaq. The Mi'kmaq, who inhabit this part of Canada, and part of the United States, and moving into Quebec. The Mi'kma'ki have a creation narrative, and in the creation narrative there are 4 primary characters. There's Glooskap, the character who a lot of people know, folkloric in Nova Scotia, but there are 3 other characters, and this is really fascinating. This is great. So Glooskap is created by 2 or 3, depending on which story you hear, bolts of lightning. He's encased in sand, and he's freed up, and he begins to roam the world. He goes all over the world, goes everywhere. And when he comes home, when he comes back to this part of the world, to where the sun rises, he encounters his grandmother. His grandmother's here, right? And she's wisdom. She's wisdom. And he can't do anything about her. She's critical to him. Wisdom. And then they go a little further, the grandmother and Glooskap, and they encounter a hunter, a young man, and it's Glooskap's nephew. And Glooskap's nephew is going to take care of everybody because he's strong and he'll hunt. And he'll do those noble things. And then they bump into Glooskap's mom. She's here too, right? So these 4 characters make up a lovely balance. And in Native spirituality and First Nation spirituality and Mi'kma'ki spirituality, balance is really critical. Balance is at the center of it all. There's harmony. There's 2 men and 2 women, and they're in harmony with creation. That's the purpose. They've got to do that. They're in harmony with creation. It's a beautiful story. And then suddenly, we all lose track of it. We don't work all that well in our world when our world is disturbed or disrupted. We like to live in small clusters, small little groups, small little caves. We like to have people like ourselves around, and that's deadly. That's actually a death sentence. If you surround yourself with people like you, you're going to die. I just promise you that. Because you have no diversity, you have no perspective, you have no wisdom. There is no wisdom. And we do that. And if we don't have people around us like ourselves, we get anxious. And anxiety is the biggest and most lethal of all diseases. Anxiety is controlling the world's economy right now. Anxiety, if we got rid of anxiety, everyone would do really well. We would, but anxiety causes us to hoard, anxiety causes us to create walls, build walls. It creates the space between us and everybody else. That's what anxiety does. We've lost balance. We've lost touch with logos. When we have anxiety, there are fewer and fewer options. When we have anxiety, we think myopically. We think of only one particular thing. So in order to deal with the anxiety in our world today, we've been sold a really bad bill of goods. And the bill of goods we've been sold because we're anxious people, because we've lost touch with our humanity, is to militarize. We live in a heavily militarized world. So this is the radical thing of today's sermon. Let's get rid of guns. I'm talking guns everywhere. I'm talking the police, no guns. I'm talking military, no guns. I'm talking everybody, no guns. No guns. 0 guns. 0 tolerance for guns. Yeah, that's silly. That's absolutely preposterous. Because might is right. No, might is wrong. Might is so incredibly wrong, it's killing you. And we're not even paying attention to it. That's how destructive might is. Might brings out weapons first and asks questions later. I'm sympathetic to police officers and soldiers in our society. Many of them go into very difficult situations, highly militarized situations. I've spoken to friends of mine who are police officers, and they say, Jody, in the last 20, 30 years in Dartmouth and Halifax, there are more and more weapons in the street, and police officers go into those situations anxious. I have no doubt that happens. Absolutely no doubt at all that happens. I think that's very real, because there are guns. Let's say we remove guns from everybody, then the anxiety level drops. And then we have a whole series of new options. That's what I'm talking about. We get rid of them all. Everywhere. And let's look at the case most recently of Rashad Brooks, the man who was killed in Atlanta. He's been drinking and driving, he falls asleep, the police officers knock on the window, and apparently there's a conversation for about 40 minutes, or half an hour, 40 minutes, and they seem to be getting along okay. And then they arrest him, he resists arrest. and then there's a scuffle, and he starts running away. He's got a taser. Taser's non-lethal, and he's shot and killed. Let's eliminate the guns and see what takes place. Let's eliminate the guns and see what happens. A really interesting thing can occur. Think, you're not anxious. You're not an anxious police officer. Just imagine that. You're sitting there and he's running away, and you go, he's running away. He's faster than we are, guy. But you know what? We have his car. See, you have options when you don't have anxiety. You have options. We have his car, and inside his car is his address. So instead of running after him, why don't we just drive over to his house and sit down and have a chat with him at the kitchen table and say, you know, you're drinking, you're driving, and that's not cool, and we're going to have to charge you with that. And, you know, you're going to have to talk to your kids about that. And I know it's your kid's birthday, and this is really not a good thing. But let's see what we can do to make it better for everybody. There are no guns, and suddenly there are options. There are options for everybody. Mr. Brooks is less frightened. The police officers are less frightened. Everyone's less frightened. Yeah, you know, that's a really radical way of looking at things. But it's about restoring balance. It's about restoring humanity. Logos, in the beginning. John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word in its very core is love and reconciliation. In the beginning. And Jesus comes into the world as a part of a single arc that says, let's go back and go forward to a place where we're in relationship with each other, where we can love each other and be kind to each other, where conversations can occur. Let's fight all those things that cause anxiety. Let's build bridges. Let's listen to each other's stories. Let's learn from each other. Let's find the strong and the brave. Let's find the wisdom. Let's find the goodness and the connection. On this day, on Father's Day, for the wise fathers and the wise mothers and those people who pass on wisdom, who don't become overwhelmed by anxiety, who teach their children well. Blessings to all of you.